Illinois needed some late game heroics to get past the Toledo Rockets in week number 1. But week number 2 presents an even stiffer challenge for Illinois, specifically this orange and blue defense, because it's the return of Jalon Daniels at quarterback for the Kansas Jayhawks. Can the Illini slow down? Can they contain one of the most explosive offenses in the Big 12?
From LA to Piscataway, all Big Ten all year long. This is Big Ten 10.
I think we knew that Toledo was at the very least going to give Illinois a few problems and push them a little bit. But I think Toledo pushed them a little bit further than everybody anticipated, taking them all the way down to the final seconds, the last second field goal needed for the Illini to defeat the defending MAC champions in week number 1. Now you fast forward here to week number 2. You got to go on the road to a Power 5 team in Kansas, which was one of the most explosive offenses in college football early last season. Remember Jalon Daniels? They were lighting the world on fire. They were lighting scoreboards on fire, putting all kinds of yards, all kinds of points last year. They were the darling of college football before Jalon Daniels got hurt, and then Kansas took a little bit of a dip late in the season when Jalon Daniels was not in the lineup. But now with Jalon Daniels expected to return for this week 2 game against Illinois, this presents an even greater challenge than Toledo was in week number 1 for this Illinois defense specifically. All right, let's talk about Kansas. In this game, Jalon Daniels is a dual threat quarterback that can throw the ball really well. He's really accurate, and he presents a problem with his legs as well. And it's not just him. They've got all sorts of returning weapons around him as well. How about a returning 1,000-yard rusher in Devin Neal? They returned the top 4 receivers from their team last season. Guys like Lawrence Arnold, Luke Grimm, Mason Fairchild, Quentin Skinner. Here's the thing about their top 4 receivers from last season. Their top receiver did not have more than 750 yards last season. Their 4th receiver on that list had at least 440 yards, which means what? Which means they spread it around. You can't clue in on one guy or even 2 guys. There's multiple weapons across this Kansas offense that Illinois has to deal with right off the gate. That's the first thing. Okay, so we know that this offense is going to be very difficult to defend. How do you defend it if you're Illinois coming into this game? Well, you need more of a presence in the pass rush, right? Illinois just had 1 sack last week. They had 4 tackles for loss, but in terms of the pass rush, you need to get home a lot more against this Kansas offensive line. It was Tariq Barnes that got into the backfield for a sack against Toledo. Johnny Newton and Keith Randolph, right, the law firm that everybody's talking about up front, they combined for 0 sacks and 0.5 tackles for loss against the Rockets in week number 1. They need to take a big step up. They need to have more of an impact, I believe, in week number 2, because if you let Jalon Daniels be comfortable back there in that pocket, they're going to put up 40. They might put up 50, who knows, in this football. They're not going to put up 50 against Illinois, but you get the general idea. They're going to put up a lot of yards, and they're going to put up a lot of points. So you got to create havoc, and you got to create pressure, but it needs to be controlled pressure. And you need to have that spy eye from the linebacking core as well, because if you come up hard off the edges and you get that pressure on the defensive line or people coming off the edge, Jalon Daniels has the awareness, he has the wherewithal, and he has the ability, the quickness with his legs to get outside the pocket and bust it off for a 20 or a 30-yard run. That's why in the linebacking core, guys like your Tariq Barnes, your Gabe Akis, your Seth Coleman, guys like that, they need to have that spy eye on Jalon Daniels. They need to know their assignments, and that's just one more thing that they have to deal with. This mobile quarterback, what Jalon Daniels can do. I could imagine in this game, Kansas is going to try to neutralize some things up front, the Johnny Newtons and the Keith Randolph. You could see a lot of read plays. You could see some RPO game from Kansas as well. Kind of looking back last year on film with Jalon Daniels, they did a lot of that, especially with Devin Neal in the backfield. You bring in multiple backs into the backfield. You run read type of offense that allows you to do multiple things, maybe in the run game and then the run/pass game as well. And we know the great pass weapons that are out on the perimeter here for this Kansas offense as well. Now you kind of translate it. Okay, this secondary, right? You take a look at last week against the Toledo Rockets. They gave up 230 yards against Toledo. So this secondary is going to be tested a lot more. There's no question about that. Now, it doesn't sound like Matthew Bailey is going to be in the lineup, who probably is Illinois' top defensive back. So Miles Scott, right? He had that big pick six in the second half. He's going to have to make some plays. Taz Nicholson and others are going to have to step up. They're going to have to do their part defending against these great Kansas receivers on the outside. There's a lot of them. So you can't just depend on a couple of defensive backs to have a good game. Everybody needs to have a good game back there. But I firmly believe it's attacking and getting not allowing Jalon Daniels to go through all of his progressions, not allowing him to go through all of his reads very quickly. It's swarming him and collapsing the pocket, I believe, is going to be a big key, because if you allow this Kansas offense to do whatever they want, they're going to do whatever they want on the offensive side of the ball. Is Jalon Daniels going to be a little bit rusty and all this stuff kind of coming out of the gate the first game? We'll see. But, Illinois needs to get into the backfield and disrupt Jalon Daniels. This is going to be a challenge. There's no doubt about that. So we talk and we praise and we say all these things about Kansas's offense, and they deserve it, right? They look really good on the offensive side of the ball. But when you look on the defensive side of the ball, it's kind of the exact opposite. This was a defense last season that gave up 35.5 points per game. That's 124th out of 131 teams in scoring defense last year. They brought in some transfers up front. They did some things. But for the most part, this is kind of very similar to last season on the defensive side of the ball for the Jayhawks, which present some real good opportunities for this Illinois offense. Okay, we know Luke Altmeyer looked really good in week number 1. We know the solid to good wide receivers that they have: Isaiah Williams, Pat Bryant, Casey Washington, Tip Ryman, guys like that at tight end. But I think in order for Illinois to come out with the victory, for them to be really successful against Kansas, I firmly believe playing Brett Bielema time of possession football is key. You need to establish more of a running game in this game because when you look at Reggie Love from last week, when you look at Josh McCray, they combined for 88 yards between them. Luke Altmeyer actually led the team in rushing. But when you look at McCray and Love, they didn't have an outstanding effort rushing the football between themselves in traditional run plays in this Illinois offense. Week 1 against Toledo, you need to try to keep Jalon Daniels in that offense off the field. The less times they touch the football and the more time that you can chew off the clock and get touchdowns specifically, the greater chance that Illinois is to be able to win this football game. Boy, these new clock rules could really play into Illinois' favor, because we talk about a lot of coaches have complained about the less possessions that they have, the limited possessions that they have. But if you see a team like Illinois, if they're able to run right out, if this offensive line is able to be physical and dominate the line of scrimmage up front, and then Luke Altmeyer makes the plays that he makes on the outside, I believe that's Illinois' path to victory on the offensive side of the football right now. If they can do that, things are going to work out, I think, pretty well for Illinois. You can't get in a shootout with Kansas and win. You just can't. Illinois is not built for that. That's why they need to be able to run the football, take time off the clock, and once again, limit the possessions of Jalon Daniels in Kansas. Boy, this is a game that I've had circled in terms of a non-conference game on my calendar as one of the most intriguing non-conference games for a Big Ten team, because you have a contrast in styles, right? A Brett Bielema coached team that's tough, defensive-minded, and physical, and then you look at Lance Leipold and Kansas on the other side of the ball, and they love to sling it around. They love to put up points. They like to outscore you. Which style is going to win out? I firmly believe whoever can establish their style is going to win the game. Illinois, when you talk about their defense, circling back to that, when you talk about pressure, I think you got to talk about turnovers. Because even if they're able to get into the backfield, I still think Kansas is going to put up theirs in this game. They might be able to put up 250, 300 yards passing, something like that. They're still, I think, going to have a good offensive day. but it's forcing turnovers, right? Collapsing the pocket, maybe getting in there for a strip sack, forcing a fumble, hitting the quarterback, fluttering ball, interception, something like that. I still think, even though Illinois' secondary, of course, isn't as good as last year without guys like Sidney Brown and Devin Witherspoon, this is still an attacking defense. This is still a defense that's going to look to force some turnovers in this game. And this would be a challenge facing Kansas, even for last year's defense with guys like Sidney Brown and Devin Witherspoon. I know I've said that a lot. I know I keep on beating that drum, but this is a Kansas offense that can do some things. We know just the turnover, and we know without Matthew Bailey, they're just trying to figure things out back there in that secondary. Illinois is. So when you have that type of learning and development kind of going on in the back end for this Illinois defense, and then you have what Kansas has, that's a tough matchup, I think, in this game for Illinois. But this should be a very good game. This should be a very intriguing game on a Friday night in a non-conference showdown. I want to hear what you guys think. Do you think Illinois can control the pace of play? Do you think that they can win time of possession, keep Kansas off the field? Or do you think Kansas is going to open up their offense with Jalon Daniels back in the lineup? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. We'll see you in the next one.
Thanks for watching Big Ten TED, where it's all Big Ten all year long. Make sure to like the video to spread the word of Big Ten TED to the masses, and subscribe to the channel for updates on Big Ten content that drops every day.